Sporting events take all shapes and sizes. Every year brings around hundreds of baseball games, a Super Bowl, NCAA tournament games, and now, video game championships. Video games, an entertainment form once written off as child's play, has become a path to college scholarships, big-time paydays, and yes, even massive TV ratings.
The League of Legends Championship gets streamed online, and it can get more viewers than a World Series game. Video games are no longer a subculture. They're no longer just a little pastime. They are, in many regards, as big as Hollywood movies. They're as big as professional sports.
That's Andrew Ervin, a critic and author who explores the past, present, and future of video games in his book, Bit by Bit, How Video Games Transformed Our World. And he's right. Last year's televised championship of the game League of Legends drew a staggering 36 million viewers. About 15 million more than watched the Cubs beat the Indians in Game 7 of the World Series, and 5 million more than tuned in to the decisive Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Ervin says, whether we all notice it or not, video games have become as major an entertainment medium as anything else.
There's a perhaps too easy parallel to draw with the history of cinema. That's a useful analogy, and it takes us pretty far, but not all the way. Where the early days of cinema, it was merely a technical achievement, that cinema was great because all of a sudden there are moving pictures, then all of a sudden there's sound with them, and eventually there's color, and all of these different technical advances helped people who were thinking in terms of artistry and self-expression. They started to use these tools to their advantage. Orson Welles certainly didn't invent cinema, but he revolutionized it. He demonstrated that it is a valid artistic platform or art form. We saw the same sort of development with video games, where beginning in 1958 at a government lab on Long Island, we had a game called Tennis for Two that by any definition today is crude and frankly boring. But every generation added to the technical prowess at our fingertips.
Of course, with growing popularity, video games have very famously been scorned. The game Doom has been blamed for emboldening the Columbine shooters in the months leading up to the massacre. More recently, parenting groups have come out against games like Call of Duty and Mortal Kombat for exposing children to increasingly realistic violence. Ervin says this isn't so much of a problem with video games as it is something the entire culture needs to reckon with.
People don't understand that video games are just another form of expression. They're still seen as something other than what we're accustomed to from our storytelling media. And a large part of that, I think, has to do with the perception of video games as violent. Most people, when we think of video games, we think of guns and militaristic shoot-'em-ups, first-person shooter games, and it's true that those are often the most popular and best-selling games every year, just as the most popular and best-selling films tend to be, quite violent. But at the same time, just as though there's a lot of violence at the Cineplex, there are also the local art house theaters showing great, thoughtful, quiet, contemplative films. Video games work the same way. There are an enormous number of really beautiful, smaller games or independent games made by individuals who are just trying to get some idea across.
Ervin says it's important for people to see video games as more than just violent. He says there's so much more to the vast library of games than just first-person shooters.
Video games can teach empathy. They can teach social skills. Video games can teach high-level problem solving. They can be as maddening in some regards as the most difficult crossword puzzles. They can teach us motor control in some regards. There are frivolous video games. There are video games that are as junky and as brain candy-like as the worst Hollywood spectacles. But there are also video games that are working at a deep intellectual level and making us rethink the world and our own assumptions about it.
Ervin says that as a child of the 1970s, the light bulb that video games could be more than just disposable entertainment went off in his mind when he was just a kid.
It's one of those experiences that right now we take it so for granted, it's so mundane that we no longer think about it. There was a game called Adventure on the Atari 2600, and this was the first game where there was an avatar on the screen that represented us as players. And of course, this is obvious now. We have avatars in every game we play, where all these characters and all these games. But the first time that we saw that, or I saw that, was this little innocuous square on an Atari 2600 that all of a sudden, that was me somehow on the screen. And I'm also sitting on the floor of the living room with the controller, the joystick in my hand. That represents a fundamental shift in what it means to be human. And that sounds like a grand statement, but I think it's true. That Walt Whitman famously said, "I am large, I contain multitudes." And he was speaking about how each of us as an individual has all of these different voices and personalities and attitudes, and we are complex, difficult creatures. With that little square in adventure, for the first time, it wasn't that I contain multitudes, it's that I am multitudes. I am more than one thing at one time.
According to Ervin, that once monumental realization has become somewhat ordinary to our modern society. But that doesn't mean the feeling of multitudes isn't still central to experiencing a video game.
Right now, we see that across social media platforms. I'm this person sitting here talking to you and your listeners. On the radio, I'm the man in the Atari game. I've got my Facebook profile. I've got my Twitter feed. I've got a persistent avatar in the game World of Warcraft. All of a sudden, what it means to be an individual human being has been diffused across a lot of different digital spaces. I think that's more apparent in video games than anywhere else.
And as time has gone on, Ervin says that experience has become even more engaging as the video game industry has grown more and more vast.
The greatest strength of the video game medium is the diversity of games and kind of games, and that goes along with the diversity of the players themselves. Everybody plays games now, every demographic, every age group. It's a very exciting thing. And I think that speaks to what makes this medium slightly different from books, which I love. Obviously, I've written a book. There's an interactivity to reading. There's an interactivity to watching a movie. I don't think we're merely passive viewers. But when we play a video game, there can be a social aspect that is enormously rewarding. And I think that communal experience of telling and sharing and experiencing stories together is very exciting.
Ervin says that ultimately, like films before them, video games have transcended their status as a technical achievement and become something more powerful.
The general idea that I started with is, can a video game be a work of art? Has the definition of what we consider art broadened enough, or have video games progressed enough as a medium that they've become artful? And what I've discovered is that the latter is certainly true, that there are video games right now that are doing all of the things that great movies do and great books do, great television does. We're seeing that more in video games now. Across any platform you might have at your disposal, there are artistic games that you can find that are going to make you think about the world differently and think about yourself differently. Even on your iPhone or your cell phone, there's a game called Passage. It's created by a man named Jason Rohrer. The Museum of Modern Art in New York has added this game to their permanent collection, which I think says something. It takes 5 minutes to play the game, and within that 5 minutes, you will experience an entire lifetime in the life of a character. It starts in youth, the game ends at old age, and eventually death. And to have what seems like a simple video game raise questions about mortality itself, to me, is tremendous.
And Passage isn't alone. Ervin also recommends the iPad game Monument Valley and the PlayStation 3 game Journey for people looking for more artful video games to really make them think. Andrew Ervin's book, Bit by Bit, is available now. For more information about all of our guests, visit viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.
Today's pet owners are eating clean and increasingly want the same for their four-legged friends. Clean eating expert Terry Walters is here to tell us about feeding the whole family clean.
Clean eating is all about making informed choices about what we eat and trying to move closer to the source of ingredients. In fact, 9 out of 10 dog owners said in a recent survey that they try to eat clean foods at least some of the time, and 3/4 said their eating habits are making them reflect on the quality of the food they give to their dogs. That's why the Nutro brand, a pioneer in natural pet food, is setting a new standard with the launch of its new food philosophy, Nutro, Feed Clean. This new pet food philosophy truly shows their commitment to making pet food recipes that are simple, purposeful, and trustworthy, made with real, recognizable ingredients as close to their native form as possible.
Nutro Pet Food is available nationwide in pet specialty stores and online at major retailers. For more information on the Nutro Feed Clean philosophy and products, visit nutro.com.
Opiant Pharmaceuticals has become well known for developing a nasal spray to help people who overdose from heroin and opioids. Now the company has begun a Phase 2 clinical trial using similar nasal spray technology with the goal of combating the eating disorder bulimia nervosa. Dr. Roger Crystal is CEO of Opiant Pharmaceuticals.
The reward from binging on foods arises from the ingesting of food high in sugar, fat, or salt that activates the opioid system in the brain. When a person feels susceptible to a binge, we believe that our nasal spray can block the brain's opioid receptors and may be able to shut down the reward pathway, which then suppresses the urge to overeat.
Bulimia nervosa is a serious and potentially life-threatening eating disorder with a severe need for treatment options. The only currently FDA-approved medication has a remission rate ranging from 19 to 41% when combined with psychotherapy. Find out more at opiant.com.
We've all seen a lot of stories in the news about contaminants in drinking water. No wonder that 86% of American adults have concerns about their water quality. So what can you do to ensure you have cleaner, safer, more pure-tasting water for you and your family? Culligan International's Truth About Water campaign can help. Zach Schreck is Director of Product Management at Culligan.
Thousands of water systems around the country show excess levels of contamination. Testing the water coming out of your tap is extremely important, especially if you notice corroded plumbing fixtures, unpleasant odors in taste, or discolored water. Did you know that some contaminants have no odor, taste, or smell? Your local Culligan man can test your water and provide solutions for your particular problems. For example, a reverse osmosis drinking water system is convenient and cost-effective, giving you great-tasting water right from the tap.
National Drinking Water Month in May is more relevant than ever. Visit Culligan.com to contact your local Culligan man and find out more about Culligan water treatment products.